Hey guys, the Wood Craftsman here. So this is the follow-up video and kind of a review of the CA Technologies 14-to-1 Airless unit. I'm going to try to stay to point and try not to drift as far as any parts of the topic, but I'm going to try to touch on a lot of things as far as why I chose CA Technologies, what's different about them compared to some of the competition out there, and just kind of some dialogue I've had with the supplier, a couple of YouTube members, and along with the manufacturer as well. So let's get started. So I've been looking for an airless unit for spraying the high build pigmented pre-catalyzed lacquers for some time now. It's probably been for probably at least 6 months, but haven't really decided to do anything until just recently. So doing a lot of research on the new Kremlin C1018, just because I've bought a lot of Kremlin equipment in the past. The Graco Merkur and Merkur ES. Briefly look at the Binks MX412. And I also looked at the Wagner Wildcat 1840 and then the CA Technologies 14-to-1 Airless unit as well. I looked at basically pricing to kind of start out with. And all these models I looked at all have an identical output or flow rate. They range anywhere from 0.33 to 0.5. For the most part, they're all in that 0.33 to 0.4. However, the Wagner Wildcat 1840 came in at a 0.5. Pricing on all of them were very identical to each other. The Graco Merkur ES in stainless steel was around $2,500 in a 15-to-1 ratio. The Graco Merkur 15-to-1 in stainless steel also was around that $2,500. The difference between the two is basically the fluid section. The Merkur has a bigger fluid section than the Merkur ES, but the Merkur ES is really kind of more so for like the entry level versus the Merkur is more of kind of like a production end. The Binks MX412, I did see some pricing online for that. It was around $2,800. And then the Wagner Wildcat, I saw, I think for about $2,400. The Kremlin C1018, a 10-to-1 ratio again, just like the old 10-to-14s, about $2,500. And then the CA Technologies 14-to-1 in stainless steel, about $1,800. So there's about a $500 to $700 swing between the CA Technologies and the rest of the competition. So, you know, naturally CA Technologies wasn't my first choice. I really took a look at another Kremlin again, just for a simple reason. I've got two of them that have been holding up decently. But I just thought, you know, at the same time I need to look at other avenues as well. The thing that I was looking at with all of it was making sure that everything was stainless steel. And the one thing I found out with the Wagner Wildcat is that one did not state it was stainless steel. It said it was stated to be thick chrome plated. So if you're spraying an acid cured coating, whether it's a pre-catalyzed lacquer, a post-catalyzed lacquer, or a post-catalyzed conversion varnish, anything that has an acid in it to help it cure, definitely want to use stainless steel for a lot of different reasons. I know that some people might look at it, it's like, well, if I buy stainless steel, it's, you know, it's going to cost me $500 more. I will pretty much almost guarantee you that going to stainless steel is going to be worth it in the long run, just for the simple reason if you do a pigmented coating, like a pigmented pre-catalyzed lacquer or a pigmented post-catalyzed conversion or whichever, you're on a very high risk of metal contamination, and you'll definitely see it in a pigmented coating versus a clear. Clear, you might see an off-color offset a little bit, but on a pigmented version, I think you definitely see it, and if you're really unlucky, it'll show up after it's in the field. So that's just my word of caution to those of you who are looking to save money by going to non-stainless steel. You know, chrome plated is fine to a certain extent, but once it's chipped or once it gets abraded, you start running those same risks again associated with you know, carbon steel and the other non-stainless steel versions. Looking at the CA Technologies as kind of like a last alternative, I kind of want to understand why CA Technologies was so much cheaper. So I actually reached out to a company that I actually ended up buying one from. I reached out to a company called Finish Systems, and just talked to one of their associates, guy by the name of Eddie, and just wanted to get an understanding as far as why is the CA Technologies pump so cheap? What's so different about it? What am I missing? What does it not have that the rest of the pumps I've been looking at that have the higher price range? And he basically, you know, after probably about a 20-minute conversation, was basically saying that CA Technologies is a much smaller company. They're more customer driven. You know, they're not this big production company that is looking to service the entire world. They got a very comfy spot in the market with the air spray and HVLP spray guns, and now starting to get the Airless. They're not really into the big fluid handling equipment like Graco and Kremlin is. They have a spot in the market, and I think they're very content with that. The other thing too is that that he had mentioned is the thing with CA Technologies is if you have a problem and you need to talk to somebody, you call the 800 number and you actually talk to a person. There's no answering service that actually answers your call and reroutes or redirects it to some other department, and then they might have to move your call to some other department or whichever. It doesn't get lost in the cloud, basically. And he invited me and said, you know what, I would invite you and encourage you to actually call those guys at CA Technologies and, you know, ask them questions that you know what you want to know more about. And so I actually did take the time to do that. I actually called CA Technologies, you know, shortly after that, and just really wanted to know as far as what's so different about their 14-to-1 pump compared to the Graco Merkur or the Kremlin 1014 or any of these other pumps. What's so different? And basically, he took the time to explain what is so different about these pumps. Their air motor is a little bit different than the rest of the competition. They use stationary magnets versus some traditional springs and special seals that other manufacturers use, or they also use valve bodies. And the fluid section, for example, is more unique compared to the competition out there. So the fluid section is what really kind of caught my interest, which is really kind of a big wear item. On a Kremlin or any other unit, for example, but I'm going to talk about the Kremlin because that's what I know the most about. On a Kremlin 1014, the fluid section is very simple. Kremlin went after simplicity, and they did a very good job at it. They took a stainless steel tube, and in that tube there is a piston that moves up and down. And there is a Teflon seal that has a channel around the outside that's on the top side. That seal rubs up and down inside that stainless steel cylinder that creates the vacuum to pull the material up into the cylinder and pressurizes the material as it exits. Very simple. Over a period of time, that U seal would have to get changed. And depending on what it is you're spraying, if it's very abrasive, such as like a primer or a pigmented lacquer or enamel or whichever, eventually you can actually score up the inside of the cylinder and you have to replace the cylinder. From what I found out, cylinders aren't cheap. They're about $250. On the CA Technologies, they had explained that their fluid section is quite different than the rest of the competition. And he had said to me that there is no moving parts that actually make contact with their stainless steel fluid section. And I couldn't really understand what he was talking about. And he tried to explain to me, and I couldn't really figure it out at first. But then he had told me at the same time that I could go to their website and actually download a PDF file that basically shows the step-by-step pictures and instructions that actually show you how to rebuild the air motor and how to rebuild the fluid section. So I was really interested in the fluid section. And here's basically what they've done. Inside that fluid section, there is a sleeve that is slipped inside that fluid section. On the bottom of the sleeve, it also has the ball cage built into the bottom. It's machined in there, unlike a separate piece that all the other manufacturers use. Ball cage, real briefly, it's exactly what it is. There's a stainless steel ball on the bottom, and it has typically it's like a tripod shaped cage. And what that does, that keeps the ball from getting caught up into the piston, and at the same time, that ball is used as a check valve, basically. That sleeve that CA Technologies uses is made out of a material called Delrin. It's a plastic. It's designed. It's very chemically resistant, and it's got some high wear properties, so it takes a while for it to wear. Like a lot of us woodworkers, we like to use HDPE or UHMW for its slickness and wearing properties. A lot of finishing and chemical equipment companies like to use Delrin because it has good wear properties and also has good chemical resistance for a lot of different chemicals. So they've used this Delrin sleeve that's actually an insert or liner, if you will, inside that stainless steel cylinder. That Delrin sleeve has basically taken the grunt of the abrasion. So when it comes to cost of ownership, say comparing to a Kremlin or a CA Technologies, when I finished systems the second time, I talked to a guy by the name of Bob. Bob made it very clear to me that the rebuild kits and parts in general are about 30% less than Kremlin as a comparison. Now, Kremlin is typically pretty high in repair costs, but when you look at Graco and Binks, I think they're going to be somewhat identical, maybe not quite as much, but I think they're still going to be fairly high. When you rebuild a Kremlin air motor, for example, like right now I have one here that I ordered, a Kremlin air motor maintenance kit. It has all the O-rings, it has the lower seal, it has the upper changeover valve, which is a brass nut with some holes in the top and like a little plastic wafer, and the couple springs that go inside the piston. That there was, I think, about 80 bucks roughly. And if you want to rebuild the fluid section for a Kremlin, a fluid section maintenance kit consists of the upper throat seal. That's the seal that goes around the shaft that moves up and down that does the pressurizing. Includes the lower foot valve assembly with the ball cage and the stainless steel ball. It includes a new Teflon seal, or the U-cup, that actually does the pressurization of the material, and the new ball bearing that goes inside the bottom of the piston for the check valve as well, again with all the O-rings. That kit there is about 350 bucks. All right, so air motor kit we're looking at about 80, and a fluid section kit about 350. So let's call it $430 to rebuild a Kremlin 1014 from top to bottom. So if you look at CA Technologies, for example, now their air motor kit is a little bit more expensive. Their air motor kit consists of all the O-rings, I think the bottom seal. The air motor rebuild kit is about 80 bucks roughly. When you look into the fluid section, for example, the fluid section includes the upper throat seal, the Delrin sleeve, and with the built-in seal on top of that. And remember, the Delrin sleeve also has the ball cage machined into it, and it also has all the O-rings necessary as well. That rebuild kit, whether you have the adjustable throat seal or the non-adjustable throat seal, ranges anywhere from about $100 to about $130. So let's use $130 and
$80.
You're now looking at
$210
compared to $430. So that's kind of the differences, just as far as what makes the CA Technologies different than the Kremlin. So that's kind of, the difference between the say the Kremlin and the 1014, because the 1014s are very popular. The C1018 is just a newer version of it. I'm going to actually start going through the pump now here and actually just going through some things that make theirs a little bit different compared to some of the competitors. All right, so this is the pump itself. As you can see, it's a little bit bigger than the Kremlin. You can see some similars. The guns are kind of identical to each other. Very, they're still unique in their own ways, but they're similar to each other. If you can use an MVX, you'll have no problem with the Bobcat. Okay, so this is the unit itself. It's very simple and well maintained as far as just the appearance of it, which really to me is not a big thing. They've changed this over the years. They used to actually have the regulators mounted on the side of the air motor, just like the Kremlins. And over the years, they've kind of changed this a little bit. They used to have the gauges up here, and these gauges now are actually separate from the regular. There's actually a piece of nylon tubing in the back that connects these. So these gauges aren't your typical screw-in gauges. They're actually a back connection with a piece of tubing. So these are totally independent. They've added these, ball valves to basically shut off the air to the pump and also shut off your atomizing air. The quality of the gauges and regulators definitely are not something cheap. They definitely have some quality behind them. They got these steel nuts. Actually, it's not plastic. The actual fluid section itself, this is what they call the throat cup or the solvent cup, and I actually have the throat lubricant in there right now. But to take the pump off of this, they send you a wrench, and you bust this loose and you spin it off. You disconnect your fluid hose and you disconnect your pickup tube, and the whole pump comes off. So you don't have to disassemble it from the air motor or take this all apart. You can easily remove the fluid section right here with it right on the cart or wall or whichever. One of the things that I really kind of liked about this pump as well was the fact that it's not loud, it's not noisy by no means, but at the same time it has a very quick changeover, so you don't see a wink in the pattern, which I've noticed to be a really nice change for once. It doesn't stall, however it's new, it shouldn't, but it's one of them things that they've really thought this through, just the overall design. So the air motor is a little bit bigger than the Kremlin in size. As far as capacity wise, again, it's a 14-to-1 versus a 10-to-1. But other than that, just the little things that they've done with this from when they started to now is just some big improvements. One thing that they had did that really kind of caught my attention was, here is the gun. This is the Bobcat gun. It's very identical to the Kremlin MVX. So if you have a Kremlin MVX and you're looking for an alternative, I'd take a good look at the CA Technologies Bobcat. It's a very similar feel. The only thing I don't like about the CA Technologies Bobcat gun is the safety. You have to use this little pin here, so you got to use one hand or one finger to push the pin in, and then you can use the other finger to advance the safety or to advance the lever, and then you're free to go. And it'll stay there as long as you don't flick it back with your finger again. Now it's locked again. So but one thing they also did was I know Kremlin includes a hose cover or a hose sleeve like this, and usually they always come just wrapped up in a bag, and it's usually up to the person the person who bought it or is going to be using it to actually put it on there. CA Technologies actually took the time to actually put this sleeve on here already, and what I really liked about it is that they got the lengths right. This is already taped up from the factory, and they made sure that the air and fluid hose were in the right position before they had secured the end of the sleeve. So that's one thing there that was an extra step I had to do. Basically, I had to mount the hoses to the gun and the hoses to the pump, and that was it. I didn't have to run the sleeve or anything like that. The filter is a little bit different. It's actually a cartridge style filter, so it's got like a kind of like a Delrin seat on the end again that actually pushes up into here, and then this just gets tightened out with a wrench. Versus the Kremlin, it's actually got a stainless steel piece that's knurled on the end. They actually can spin that loose, and then the stainless steel screen will actually, or the mesh screen will actually slip off that, so you can replace that, just the mesh screen, and keep the stainless steel part. But again, I think these guys went more so for cost. The air adjusting or the pattern adjusting valve works very well, and it does work well on the Kremlins as well. However, the big thing here is, you need to make sure that you keep these holes nice and clean. And if those holes start to build up, it's usually because of the seal on the back side of the tip is starting to get wore out. The air cap, it is a little bit cheaper than the Kremlin. It's definitely not a, it's not a heavy duty one like the Kremlin. It's the air cap. It's definitely not heavy duty like the Kremlin. It's more, I think it's actually aluminum or anodized aluminum. You know, the retaining ring is a little bit thinner, but again, it's lighter than the Kremlin, so they might have really been going after weight. But as far as performance-wise, it definitely performs just as good as the MVX, if not slightly better. I do think that I was actually able to use less atomizing air with this gun than I could with the Kremlin MVX, but you know, really, they're identical to each other. So if you're looking for an alternative, this gun or this actual setup might actually be something to really take a look into. But just looking at this thing, you just see, you know, the beefy, you know, how they kind of overdone some things a little bit. This particular cylinder in the air motor is quite a bit bigger than the Kremlin. Again, it could be because it's a 14-to-1 versus a 10-to-1, but just the shaft is bigger on the pump. You know, this, like I said, this here will put out 1,500 pounds versus the Kremlin is really only good for 870. Kremlin, even though it's a 10-to-1, it's got a max pressure of 870 psi fluid. So that's kind of a bonus for these guys here, is that they can get a full 1,400 or 1,500 psi out of their units. But especially at the price point for $1,800 in a wall mount, really no complaints. So the pickup tube is a little bit narrower than the Kremlin. However, I will say it did not starve one bit. So this is a 3/8 pickup tube, and the Kremlin has a much beefier pickup tube. However, it's only the tube that's big. This is a 3/8 inch hose as well, pickup hose. This hose is not something I'm really fond of, but again, it's more so one of them overkill things. They could have definitely probably found something a little bit lighter weight and a little bit cheaper, but again, I think they're looking for longevity. So as I was mentioning, this is 3/8 and Kremlin's pickup tube is much larger. So Kremlin's tube is larger until it gets to the hose, and when it goes to the hose, it goes down to about 3/8 again. When I had gotten my third 1014 for doing the waterborne testing, when I had salvaged the fitting from the bad hose, I realized that that fitting on the bottom, it was kind of like a barb, was about a 3/8 in metric, whatever that equates to metric. And I realized then that the pickup tube itself is only about 3/8, but the actual tube that actually goes in the material is actually about 1/2 inch, but actually gets choked down up at the hose. So don't be fooled thinking that, oh, it's got a puny pickup tube. It's not like a Kremlin. The Kremlin pickup tube and the CA Technologies pickup tube is about 3/8 in general, whether it's metric or SAE. It's just that CA Technologies used a smaller tube all the way down to the strainer. If you're looking for a unit that has the bigger pickup tube, you want to look at the H2O model, which is just like this, except the actual pickup tube and hose is a 1/2 inch inside diameter versus 3/8. And then the other thing that they do is you would get the you'd still get the Bobcat or Cougar, I believe, but you would actually get a 3/16 fluid hose versus an 1/8. This is an 1/8 inch fluid hose, and it's made by Exit Flex. I've showed you guys these before. I'm actually really impressed because I actually took off my 1/8 inch fluid hoses in the past because I felt that the gun was more starved, but I don't see that with this pump operating at identical fluid pressures. So it may be that I need to reevaluate the 1/8 inch hoses on my Kremlins as well, but like I said, the difference between the H2O and the standard is the pickup tube goes from 3/8 to 1/2 inch. You get a 3/16 fluid hose, and then at the same time you get a fine finish tip versus a standard tip. So you just have to specify what you want. Now the thing with finish systems is these come with a 411 tip, which is an 8 inch pattern with 11 thousandths orifice. If you don't want that size tip, they'll gladly swap it out to a different size for you. You just need to specify it, whether it's via on the website or if you call them, you just specify what tip size you want. So other than that, guys, that's kind of the walkthrough of this. I hopefully touched base on a lot of different touch base on a lot of different parts of this setup. If you're wondering about the cart, it's actually the same carts I've been using for the Kremlin. I just had my welding shop make me up another one, and I just painted it red this time, so nothing fancy, just like I said, something the local welding shop made for me. If I were to do anything different, which I will do actually, once I use this for spraying the high build pre-catalyzed pigmented lacquers, I'm actually going to modify this tube. I'm going to see if I can get CA Technologies to just make me a stainless steel tube here with the flare on the bottom, because that's what this fitting on the bottom here, it's not really a standard fitting, it's like a gas fitting. So there's basically it's a nut that slips over a flare, and the bottom of the pump fitting is actually flared. So like I said, it's a lot like a gas fitting. I don't know if it's the same angle. If it is, then I might be able to do it myself and just get a piece of stainless steel tubing. But I would like to replace this with a shorter piece of tubing with a shorter pickup tube for gallon cans. So that's the only thing I really want to do differently with this at some point in time. And I did reach out to Finishing Systems, and they were getting me a quote on a different pickup tube with a modification as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. But other than that, guys, that's kind of the end of this review. Hopefully you guys found it helpful. I would definitely say if you're looking for a new Airless Airless system, whether you're first starting with Airless Airless or if you're looking for another one, definitely take a look at the CA Technologies 14-to-1. Alright guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video and this kind of this review and conclusion of my thoughts on the CA Technologies. I'll definitely do more videos of it as I use it more and more. But definitely, if you're looking for an alternative to the 1014 or anything else out there, or looking to save money, definitely take a look at the CA Technologies 14-to-1. Alright guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Questions and positive comments are welcome. Thanks for watching.